Thank you all for your enlightening statements to begin with. And now I know there have been lots of questions that have come from the audience. And none of these are directed to anyone in particular, so I have randomly selected the order in which you can respond with your 1.5 minutes if you wish to. The first question, and we will start with Gail Price. Do you believe in reducing city payroll, benefit, and pension expenses? And if so, how?
Thank you for the question. I feel very strongly that we're currently in a situation on the edge of a strike where it represents a real breakdown in communication. I think we do need to make responsible decisions. I do feel that we need to set up a joint benefits committee, which is like what was done in the Palo Alto School District. So we develop long-term, respectable relationships, and we really aggressively look at the short-term and long-term implications. My concern about immediately going to potential staff reductions is then that will have direct service impacts, and then the community will then be in an uproar because services might need to be reduced. The ways I would look at this is there are restructuring ideas, there are additional furlough ideas, joint benefits, as I mentioned. We need to be doing contracting in. Currently, the fire department does provide services to Stanford and to the county. That is a revenue source. I believe very strongly that employees closest to the work have the keenest understanding of where additional cost savings can take place. I believe that on both sides of the table, we have a lot of ideas that have yet to be explored. I am not, of course, privy to the details of the contract negotiations now, and we need to work in a more collaborative manner. Interest-based bargaining is a more productive and positive outcome. Right now we have, I believe, positional bargaining, and we have a long ways to go. I look forward to working on this serious issue.
Corey Levins, would you like to respond?
I don't believe it's a question of whether we believe there has to be cuts here. There frankly have to be cuts in this area. 2/3 of the city budget is employee expenses. There obviously are going to be serious cuts in this area if we're going to balance our budget. Where I disagree with the approach that's being taken now is that we seem to be solely focused on eliminating benefits, trying to take the unions back to the level of benefits back in 2000 to make up for all the poor negotiating that the city councils have done since then. And that's not effective negotiating, and I don't think it's the most effective way of getting the labor to agree with what we need. And make no doubt, have no doubt, labor agrees and knows and understands the situation. A lot of people think that they're in some fairyland, and that's not the case. They have proposed a lot of cuts, and what I believe is that we need a package of cuts. Furloughs, tuition, taking away some tuition reimbursement, and there may be some layoffs as well. We also need to understand that we're not talking about the supervisor level here. We have, Palo Alto has the highest number of supervisors per staff probably of any community. We have the highest number of workers per population. So everybody understands that we need to be more efficient in delivering our services, but we need to reach a negotiated solution. A long strike has a lot of penalties and will not serve the interest of Palo Alto.
John HACKMANN?
Yes, I think we do need to negotiate with the union to achieve this fair result. It's obvious that we cannot live at the spending level within our current revenues. The supervisor level is high. I think we need to stay focused on the goal of controlling spending, and the focus there needs to be the negotiated reduction primarily in the pension, medical payout, and also employee headcount. I believe the right goal is to focus on having our bills paid at the end of each year. We're now $105 million behind in our medical bills. I think medical benefit packages are around, or can be as high as $20,000 per employee family in the city. Pension contributions are going from about $1 million per year up to about $5 million deficit, I believe, in 2015 fiscal year, according to an update report. We cannot afford this, and there just isn't the money there. There needs to be a negotiation on this topic, and all alternatives need to be explored. And I hope the citizens at this election will support the city in its very difficult negotiation. The union has the right to strike, and they should do it if it's in their interests. It will be a long and tough negotiation. There would be hardship on the city if that did happen. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. But we have to be focused on the long-term health. We're relatively in good shape compared to most cities in California. State of California is billions behind on these topics. Thank you.
Victor Frost.
Thank you. We need to look outside of the PA box to San Francisco. They're doing the same thing up there now. Their software, how they're dealing with it, they're a progressive city. We need to send somebody up there for a report. As for the unions, yeah, I used to be a Teamster, longshoreman in Eureka, so I know about unions. So that's what we should do, is look outside of the PA box, be open to new ideas and concepts. Thank you.
LEONG.
3 years ago, in 2006, the city approved a change in the pension plans to a much more generous pension plan in exchange for two things. One was that the union give back on their medical costs, which did happen, but the other thing that was part of that proposal was that the more generous pension plan would cause a wave of retirements. And with that wave of retirements, the city was supposed to look at restructuring themselves to a more cost-efficient profile. Unfortunately, over the last 3 years, what we've seen is that the union membership grew from 579 members in 2006 to currently 617, according to the city website. So rather than restructure by offering more generous pension plans and getting a waiver of retirements, we instead saw that we've added more people to the employment in the unions. So one area we need to look at is, where did all these people get added to? Can we go and look at how we can restructure, go back to restructuring to a more cost-efficient profile? Second is, we need to look at our management structure and see if we can effect a greater span of control among our management staff. Some departments are running on a 1-to-10 ratio, others are running on a much lower ratio. So we need to look and make sure that our management staff is managing the right number of people. Thank you.
Karen Holman.
As I mentioned earlier, these are both difficult and necessary negotiations. One community, or one town actually in the Bay Area, has already gone bankrupt because of the excessive benefits that are provided. This country owes a lot to unions. I'm certainly not anti-union. And I'm hoping and supposing that the union negotiations that are going on now are keeping separate the value of our employees from the compensation issues that just simply must be addressed. We are currently amassing literally hundreds of millions of dollars of unfunded benefits, and it just isn't sustainable. So I think actually the current council is doing a good job. We won't be able to, if you will, right the ship in short order, but we have to take steps to correct that. I believe we also need to address this in a two-tier system so that new employees come in under a different program, and I think that will help in the longer term. But again, we're not going to right the ship in short order. It's going to be a long-term negotiation that's going to be necessary.
Chris Gaither.
I'm very supportive of what the city is attempting to do right now in the negotiations. As my colleagues have stated, this is something that we have to get under control, and cities across the nation, counties, states, all are in the same boat because of things that occurred 10 years ago to attract employees to the public sector from the private sector and to be competitive. So now we must do a change, and this is what life is about. We have to know how to redirect ourselves. So what the city is doing is great. Unfortunately, I came here yesterday to pick up my packet, and there was a janitor by the name of Bill, so we'll call him Janitor Bill, like Joe the plumber, and he and I had a discussion, and they're very, very afraid of striking. They're concerned about there's some kind of January deadline. The workers really don't want to strike, and they're afraid about losing their jobs. They do understand that they must contribute. Their main objection is that when will it end for them? And so there's an emotional level here that the city also needs to be able to address, is that people feel like they're losing things, and somehow we need to reassure them that, you know what, in good times, maybe you'll get it back. You can't promise them that, but obviously good times were 10 years ago, and now we need to have a redirection. And I do support what the city is doing. The unfortunate thing, however, is that we're not sitting down with all three unions at once. We're dealing with the workers that are at the lower wage scale right now.
Larry Klein.
Well, clearly I support where the city is coming from on these negotiations since I've been a major part in setting that policy. The reason we're focusing on benefits, there are two reasons really. One is that's where the money is. The benefits cost, our benefits run basically a third to a half of what straight salary is. The second reason is the market has changed. The market benefits, the benefits they now have really exceed where the market is. It's a rare company that pays all of an employee's health care, for example. Pensions have become obsolete throughout most of our society. So what we're asking is not an elimination of benefits, but a reduction in the value of the benefits. That is, we're asking the city employees to pick up a greater share of the cost of the pension and a greater share, and to begin to pay a portion of their medical insurance. I also want to mention one other topic that doesn't get a lot of attention. You hear that organizations restructure, and then they do need to restructure from time to time. Unfortunately, our city council in the 90s agreed to a provision that gives the union a veto over restructuring. And that's one of the provisions we want out in our new contract. There are some other government organizations that do have this veto provision, but most do not. And it's one of the positions that I think that we really need to insist on, that the city manager have much more leeway in restructuring to achieve the economies that we've been discussing.
Nancy Shepard.
Thank you. I was at Lytton Gardens just last week, and they say that no less than 4 times a day is the fire department over there doing some type of ambulatory care. These are very important services that are looking for some type of restructuring with the union contract so that we can afford to keep jobs and keep our services long into the future with retirement benefits. For me, I'm not in favor of reducing the actual question of the payroll, because I don't think that's ever been part of the negotiations. Instead, it's been more of a shared going forward. Are we sharing the increased expenses to these benefits, and how can we split this difference to make sure we can protect these services? So I support that. I also would like to recorrelate how the negotiations are going so that they are shared values and shared principles. And I think that interest-based negotiations do a really good job of that. I got to experience that when I was in the school district. And the last year of district-wide fundraising, they hired one of the union lawyers to come in and talk to us about all of the interests that all of the schools had in the Educational Foundation. And we ended up talking about our values, not about the dollars and cents, and that's when things started to correlate. So that's how I would intend to reduce.
Dan DYKWEL.
I don't think anyone wants to make this a punitive endeavor, but it's very clear we simply can't sustain the liabilities. And I agree with Karen in that a tiered approach is probably a less dramatic way to achieve results. And with Larry mentioning there are some legal obstacles, this isn't as simple as people think. We do have very skilled negotiators working at the city to help with this. It's a very long-term solution. And in addition to that, CalPERS, which is the state retirement agency, is looking at asking for even more contributions as a result of the negative effects on their fund that the economy has had. So some of this is a little bit out of our hands, which means we have to be all the more vigilant in how we address headcount. But again, it's a very long-term solution, very difficult, and we do want to be as sensitive to it as we possibly can.
Tim Gray.
This topic deserves to start with a deep appreciation of the value that the employees of the city of Palo Alto bring to our city. And so that is the view from which I would comment on this. Also, I want to comment on it from the lens of social justice, in that there does have to be a fairness. We can't go for patches where we recycle this conversation every year by adjusting this and adjusting that. We need some deep structural changes. We have to look to the market rate. And then if there is disparity between what is truly available in the market rate and what we are paying, then we have a fiduciary responsibility to the city of Palo Alto to make those adjustments and to hold firm. Holding on to an unfair advantage by a small group of people to the disadvantage of many is not social justice. And in the end, the city has to live within its means, and we can't get around that concept.
Brian Steen.
Yes, thank you. During my time as a school board member, we struggled and succeeded on solving many of the issues that we are talking about today here in Palo Alto. We had a deficit that we paid off. We had a threatened union strike, in this case with the CTA, that was averted. We basically put the district back on a sound financial basis and paid off our unfunded retirement liabilities. This was some 20 years ago. So now it's 2009, and I see the city of Palo Alto struggling with many of the same issues. So I have experience in working with some of those issues to bring about success. I can tell you that we are doing the right thing in terms of people's intent, but I think we need to be more decisive. Some of the responsibilities that we've been discussing here and some of the difficulties are being pushed out into the future. We have this $450 million backlog in infrastructure. We have the $130 million in unmet retirement and medical liabilities, and that gets pushed out to the future. The city needs to be able to say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not the federal government. We need to live within our means, as has been said. I think we can do that by working together, but we need to be firm and decisive, and then I believe we can succeed.
And Mark Weiss, you get the last word.
There we go. Well, I'm actually a little bit ashamed at the way the leadership of our community has been handling this issue. It's a qualitative issue. I feel we could do more to boost worker morale and productivity, and I feel it's sort of a bait and switch to, it is difficult for the public sector to get good workers, especially in a good economy, and, we promised them benefits, and now we're saying we're going to take those benefits. I feel like if we treated our workers with more dignity, maybe we make up the 5 to 8% in productivity.